Codependency is a term that I had heard for decades, but always associated it with an addict relationship. So I never even considered that it might have anything to do with me until my therapist pointed out that even my email addresses screamed codependency. When I started diving in and reading up on it, my whole world changed. It explained so much while also giving me hope in knowing that A, I wasn't alone, and B, that I could change the direction I was heading in. If you haven't gone on a deep dive into codependency yourself, there's a good chance that what I'm about to share with you will blow your mind. There may be some of you that have educated yourself on it a bit, but left feeling like it doesn't really apply to you because you are the opposite of codependent. You are incredibly self-sufficient and independent. Before you dismiss this entire video, I want to invite you to have an open mind about what I'm about to share, because independence can actually be a form of codependency. In fact, I want to preface all of this by saying that everyone has some level of codependency. In one way or another, we all have codependent tendencies, just like we all have narcissistic tendencies. But until we are aware of those tendencies, we're helpless to change our circumstances surrounding that. So my hope is that this video will bring you some awareness about the level of codependency that is in your life and how it is potentially impacting your life and relationships. As I start to explain what codependency is, I want you to view yourself through the eyes of compassion. There is no reason to shame yourself, especially when it comes to behaviors that you weren't even aware of. Again, we can't begin to change until we are aware. Awareness is the first step. And I want this to be liberating for you, like it was for me. When I started to dig into codependency and what it was and how it had impacted my life, I felt empowered because I saw it for what it was and was able to change my mindset about how I was showing up in my relationships. And not just my romantic relationships, but relationships with my children and friends and even acquaintances and strangers. Codependency is defined as excessive emotional or psychological reliance on a partner. It's essentially when one person is reliant on another person, but both people benefit. One by getting their needs met and the other by being needed. So it's easy for most of us to simply dismiss it as having more to do with an addict relationship than it has anything to do with us. But it can show up in a lot of different ways. One of the most common ways I see it showing up for women, myself included, is that we have a need to be the hero or caretaker inside of our relationships, sometimes even sacrificing our own well-being in the process. We pour ourselves into proving our worth, sometimes to the point of martyrdom. I have to do everything around here because if I don't do it, no one will. In reality, it's a defense mechanism of sorts because we think if we can show them how much they benefit from being in a relationship with us, they'll never leave us. One way to think of codependency is looking to other people to validate our worth. People who have codependent tendencies essentially become dependent on their partners, friends, parents, and even patients or children in one way or another. It's possible they are dependent on just the mere presence of other people, or maybe they are dependent on the approval or on the need of others. Essentially, they have a strong need to feel needed that goes beyond a healthy need for belonging. When you think of codependency in relation to the addict and enabler, the enabler benefits just as much as the addict does because they thrive off of being needed inside of that relationship. And this extends well beyond the addict and enabler scenario. In fact, you'll see this playing out in helping occupations like nurses, teachers, social workers, or even doctors and pastors. People often enter into those professions because they thrive off of feeling like they are the savior or hero inside of those roles. To help you understand this in a different way, Maybe you have heard it said before that we all have a God-shaped hole in our heart that only God can fulfill and satisfy. We all have a craving inside of us for love, depth, and connection. And in our search for meaning and significance as humans, we will often seek out tangible things to be the ultimate source of meeting our needs. If you are married and there's a season where your husband isn't meeting your needs or your expectations, and you have huge disappointment, or maybe you're single or divorced and you're always fantasizing about being in a relationship because you feel that it will complete you, and you aren't okay until you are able to have this ideal mate that you're looking for. Most of us have something that represents our needs getting met in some way. And most of those things are the object of our codependency. So when that dream spouse doesn't come your way, or when the marriage doesn't work out, when something goes wrong in your dream job, if those things wreck you, that's revealing that you were looking to that person or thing or circumstance to be the source of your connection and satisfaction and fulfillment. I don't want you to hear me say that this is bad or sinful or super unhealthy. It's just not optimal. You can look to those things to try to get your needs met, but it's not going to be beneficial. You probably won't thrive. You probably are going to feel like your inner world is on a roller coaster if you're waiting for a person or thing to meet that internal need. What I hope as you are going through this process is that you have light bulbs go off, where you realize that you've been looking to your husband or something outside of you to make you feel wanted and needed and lovable. And there's a good chance that you are likely looking to that outside source because you didn't get it as a child. So look at yourself with compassion and understanding and recognize that this was likely a need that didn't get met, and no one ever taught you how to get that need met with God. So it's natural that you are going to look at the next best thing to fill that void. If that need would have gotten met in childhood, you probably wouldn't be codependent on someone else to fulfill that for you. And like I said, we all have a level of codependency because we have real, valid, internal human needs that aren't getting met. And we're looking for a way to latch on to someone else so that they can get met. My goal for you is to be able to recognize that need, take it to God, and allow Him to be the main source of meeting it so that you are no longer on this internal roller coaster where your well being is contingent on something outside of yourself, whether that's a person or a job or fill in the blank. As long as your well being is dependent on something outside of you in order for you to be okay, you won't be able to thrive and be fully connected to love. I lived most of my life desperately requiring other people to be happy in order to be okay. When other people become the key to our personal happiness and fulfillment, we're exhibiting codependency. And when we're living in codependency, we'll have trouble establishing boundaries, and we'll give up our voices and neglect our self care, all in the name of taking care of other people. And the more you can become aware of those tendencies, the healthier you will be, and the healthier your relationships will be. Codependency is like a big bandage that is covering up a wound that needs medical attention. All it's doing is covering it up and masking it. If we continue to remain in a codependent relationship, we're not going to be exposed to those internal wounds that need addressed. But the moment that that other person is unable to meet those needs, our whole world will be upended. That's exactly what happened to me when I went through my divorce 15 years ago. My entire identity was wrapped up in my role as a wife and mother. I didn't know how to even function outside of those roles because I depended on them for so long to define my very existence. And I don't want that for you. If I could have understood what codependency was 30 years ago, I could have saved myself a whole lot of heartache. So take a moment and reflect on your roles inside of your relationships. Start to become a curious observer in how you're showing up inside of your relationships. And when codependency shows up, there's often a villain, a victim, and a hero. And you'll find yourself looking at yourself and other people in these roles. So if your spouse or somebody is not able to meet your needs in a certain way, then they will feel like a villain to you. And you will then feel like the victim or the hero who never does anything wrong. Ultimately, people and circumstances will feel like the enemy to you in moments if you're not looking to God to be the main source of your fulfillment. When we allow God to be our main source of our identity and our validation, we're more able to show up in relationships where we give from the overflow inside of us, as opposed to desperately needing that other person or thing to fill us up. When you make that shift, everything and everyone else can be a gift added into your life and not something that you desperately require in order to be okay.